Welcome back, everyone, to Lift Talk. This is episode 25. I'm here with Matty Bartholomew, my coach today, and we're going to do a bit of a recap.
Am I just your coach today?
Yeah, just my coach today. We're here with my coach, today. And we're going to do a bit of a recap of my comp prep, my disappointing competition day itself, and hopefully provide some insight for people listening on how they can sort of navigate a competition prep, you know, what sort of things go into it, the plan itself, and then how to evaluate how it all went.
I think it's good that we're actually going this way because so often it's like chat about how well something went and why it went really well, but it's a less commonly spoken about thing, but a very common thing to happen. You know, at some point, having be that maybe a tumultuous prep or a good prep with a bad comp day, you know, it happens rather frequently, and I don't think it's really spoken about that much. I think it's a good topic.
And to speak on that, Shaza Rue actually posted, did you see her post from a few days ago?
Yep.
She posted like a number of the best female lifters in the world.
Yep.
When they've had sort of 4, 5, 3 for 9 days bombing. So it does actually happen a lot more than what you'll see on the internet. So yeah, it's very important to shed the light on the idea that this is kind of actually pretty normal.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, if you can, like, straight off the bat, if you compare it to other sports, let's say, you know, it's not relevant that it's a team sport, but a team sport like rugby or soccer, football, you're doing like a comp day every weekend, right? You're playing a game every weekend. And so wins and losses or good days and bad days for the team collectively sort of blend in, whereas it can seem a lot larger or a lot worse when you have a bad day on a comp day because generally speaking, you've at least been preparing for 3 months, oftentimes a lot longer than that. And so the weight of the day feels a lot heavier, which I think is a bit misleading because, you know, we often try, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, to focus on, you know, the positives where you can, but like, how's training going? Like, are you getting stronger? Was today representative or reflective of where you're at? And it's that cliche, right? But it's true because oftentimes when someone doesn't have their best day, they're still strong. They're still stronger than last time. That's absolutely true for you. But for whatever reason, and we're going to talk through some of those reasons, didn't come together on the day. So I think it's quite different, and there's a big contrast there to other sports where it's like, it's more chill, or somewhat more chill, and you can literally fix the thing as soon as next weekend with, you know, that weekend sport, that weekend game kind of sport. So I just thought I'd note that because that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I think to speak on that as well, Matty, like in a team sport environment, because it's so much more frequent, you get chances to review the game tape, but you also get chances to feel what it feels like to have a disappointing day or feel like what it feels like to lose more often. So It becomes like more acceptable,
normalized,
and more normal. Whereas in powerlifting, you go through months and months of training, you never miss a rep in training. And then all of a sudden you miss a few lifts in competition day and it's like, oh man, like I haven't missed a squat. And we can talk on this now. Like I haven't missed a squat since 2021 actually. So 3.5 years since I've missed a squat. Felt weird.
Yep.
Didn't quite know how to evaluate it in the moment because it was such an infrequent thing.
And I would go as far as saying that, you know, again, using that team sport example, normalizing it to some degree, understanding that in the context of powerlifting, when you are either pushing limits or you get it a bit wrong, you'll miss. That perhaps actually being a really important part of the holistic experience of powerlifting. And I often say, do you love the whole of powerlifting? You know, because there is the fun stuff, there's the winning, there's the hitting your lifts, there's the PRs, and then like anything, there's light and there's dark. So the misses and the bad days and the misgrooves and all those sorts of things, the injuries. This is the sport as much as the good stuff. Yes. So I think that perhaps I wouldn't go as far as saying you ever want someone to miss, but that, you know, I would hesitate to protect someone from missing if perhaps that was going to serve them in some way. And we can probably talk on how it's already served you to have had the day you had relative to some of the ways you were approaching the latter parts of prep. But that's the other thing too. One more thing to touch on that came to mind when you were talking about how quickly you can kind of amend the issue with that week-to-week game in another sport. I think that also helps us to lean towards the idea of making training quite similar to competition experience in some ways, and you can go too far with that, but to make competition days feel a lot like training, and so that it isn't like you're trying to do something different. I think there's some validity there. And I do think you can go too far down that sort of specificity avenue, so to speak, but that there is, I think in my own training I see this, or a lot of my lifters I see this, trying to make the blocks and the runway kind of just feel more and more the same heading into a competition, rather than this big built up thing. Oh my goodness, we're going into comp day. Like, it's cool. Like, we're training. You train well. Your blocks generally go well. Do the same thing. Mark the strength. Not like, but I'm going to like fucking push super hard and then dump this big taper and I'm going to peak so hard. Like, I think that was kind of the mindset like not too long ago. We can all kind of probably remember that sort of rhetoric. And I'm really like enjoying and supporting just changing that a little bit, where it is almost more like that ability to go into that week-to-week game in another sport where you're like, oh, let's just jig this, change this, do this, and adapt. And it might go well, it might go poorly, and you kind of just keep moving forwards. That's like a nice mindset.
And it's a lot more predictable as well, and I think that's the most important thing. There was a question about tapers later, so we'll get to that in more depth later. I think I had another point about sort of the parallels we can draw from other sports with having bad performances or poor performances or disappointing performances, and the same thing in powerlifting, is that there's actually a very fine line between a really good day and a really bad day, or a win and a loss in another sport. Like, you might play a great game of basketball and the other team hits a game winner with 1 second left and you lose. And it's like, that loss on the score sheet is the same as losing by 40 and you play terribly. Just like in powerlifting, you may have a really strong day. You miss one lift on a technicality, you miss another lift by like a smidge, and all of a sudden you're 20 kilos behind where you thought you would be. And it really does happen in the margins as well. So you can't look at someone's total and go, hey, you were, this much weaker than you were last time.
Yeah, it's black and white.
Yeah, because there's a lot of gray area and a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of like very small percentages in this.
Yep.
That look huge.
For sure. Like, you can't just say, oh, you underperformed at your comp, so your prep must have been bad or something. Like, you can have a wonderful prep and maybe some decisions on the day mean that you slightly overpredict. Your strength was actually in a PR territory, but you miss, whatever the attempt difference was between the second and the third. It's kind of what you're getting at, right? Because like, it can be this illusion.
Yeah. I just kicked the camera, Chris. Is that right? Is that all good?
You're fine.
Okay, cool. Play on.
You're completely out of frame, and it's better that way. 100%. I think like drawing that parallel is cool, because we can a lot of us can relate to that idea of sport as we knew it, maybe like before we did powerlifting. Because most people, as kids and as we grow up throughout school, we play team sports and we do these various things, and we understand that analogy of referring to team sport and that week-to-week sort of idea. And I think that if we are able to treat competitions that way, especially local competitions that are sort of less major, lower stakes, as more so just earmarking points in our progress, and trying to develop this competitor and this ability to execute on a competition day, because of course you always want to be getting better and improving. I think that's a nice way of looking at it. And we've said this many times in just casual chats, that competitors who are able to relax somewhat in general, doesn't mean they're not doing the things right, but just aren't as mentally like, I wouldn't say intense, but not putting unnecessary pressure on themselves, are often the ones that just perform really, really nicely on a competition day. Because, another thing we say all the time is that you can't just make up the kilos, or like in another sport, do a trick play and win. What you roll in with on the day is what you have, within a fair margin. So there's a lot of differences that are really cool to note there, to be able to just get a little bit of perspective on the whole thing.
All right, so the first topic I've got on my topics list here is the athlete and coach roles. This is one of your suggestions.
Yep.
Where did you want to take this chat? Did you want to talk about the difference between athlete and coach roles in a prep compared to regular training? What was your
so I think that like there's probably two things for us to talk about here. One is us. So our dynamic and how that's unique, and maybe what are some of the things that we need to look out for in that dynamic that are potential cracks in the armor, like potential weaknesses that if we don't keep an eye on them, they're going to be problematic and get bigger. And then also perhaps what some of the strengths are, like what skill sets do we have that makes the partnership really, really great. Then to be able to like elaborate on that and maybe talk more vaguely about that relationship, for the listeners to kind of think about their role in their dynamic, right? And then for the few out there who maybe self-coach as well, this is something to think about as well, because that's quite hard to do. So starting with us, we started working together off the back of already being mates. We'd been and competed together overseas, trained a bit together, and so we already had like a relationship that was not a professional one, and we knew each other already to a certain level. Coming into, and actually, I'll add to that, you've been coaching for longer than I have. So entering into that relationship, you'd come from, previous coaching relationships and come to me wanting, hey, Matty, I want to achieve X. I believe that I need this from you. And, obviously it's my job to meet those sorts of needs. What do you think are some of the things that we have to organize and be wary of with all of those dynamics in mind to make sure that it goes really well for you? What are some of the things?
So I think and I actually put this in a voice message to you literally as I was driving here. Everyone don't voice message while you're driving.
I mean, whilst I was pulled over.
Yeah, I mean, when I got to the gym. I think when things have gone really well for me was when I have been able to switch off my coach brain and sort of like veer into athlete mode more frequently, and ideally for the whole time that I'm training. I think a lot of times, because my career and my work and what I do all day is problem solve for other people. And I think, how can we tweak this? How can we change this? Is this the best option? Maybe something else would be better. That's kind of always running through my brain when I'm thinking about training. Even when I'm looking at other people's training, I'm like, oh, I wonder why they're doing this approach. I wonder why their technique's like this. That's just always going through my head.
Yeah.
And when it becomes a little bit too much of that thinking going on for my own training, I don't really commit to what's actually written down because I'm questioning it, because that's just how my brain works. So I think the thing that has made my training go really well in the past was a long time ago when I didn't know much, and it was like, do what the coach says and voila, it works because you've committed to it. And then certain other times since then, since I've been coaching longer, where I've just sunk my teeth into training, did the work, committed to the work, and then once it was done, not thought about it until the next session. That I think is probably my biggest weakness, and definitely a weakness of recent training. Trying to get a little bit too involved, trying to sort of dictate things, call the shots a little bit more than necessary, be less of the athlete, try to do your job for you when, really I should be doing the athlete stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like we've talked about it a lot. So it's not like I'm sitting here like, whoa, that's a surprise. Like we've had that conversation point blank several times. And it's usually a situation where I'm calling out the behavior. You're aware that it happens, but it kind of creeps in. It's not something where you're like, oh, Matty sucks as a coach and I'm going to question what he says. You just have that busy mind and that problem-solving mind. And so when it comes out like that, it's usually something where we sort of, we normally collaborate to a certain level. And it's when it goes kind of higher than that where it starts to be that thing where, okay, what are our roles here? Like you said, you're a coach. It's your career. You're obviously aware of the ins and outs. You know how training works. You know how programming works. And you understand how it all kind of comes together. And I think that for everyone listening at home, the things that Alex just chatted through is essentially being very self-aware of those ideas. But it's a sort of double-pronged approach where the athlete or the client can be aware of those things. But as a coach, I have to have my standards as well to be able to tell you that you're overstepping the mark. You need to back off and just do your training. And we actually kind of had that conversation, briefly over the last 24 hours. And I think that is something that would be probably a key component of when your training is very, very good, is when you're able to just trust it, understand that, you've hired me for a reason as your coach and you trust me and that I know what I'm doing. There's proof of concept with my whole team, and that I know, I'm very good at problem solving, be it your tech, be it your programming, and we know the nuts and bolts of what works. And that's the funny thing about it too, is when an athlete gets too involved in those situations, very rarely is it actually something that is of greater effect because of the change that that person wants to make. More often, it is just the mindset of actually committing to the thing, and usually that feel good of like, oh, I came up with that thing. And if we can get that feeling anyway, through some form of collaboration, but then the rest of it is sort of left to the coach to go, yeah, well, this is what we're doing. And then the athlete just goes, bet, let's go. Yeah. And actually executes it. That's it, And I think that's true for us, but I would say that's true for really every coaching relationship. And I'm sure you do too. I've got a whole spectrum of clients who behave differently in that regard. Some of them never suggest anything for their training. They just go, what am I doing? Right? And on the other end of the spectrum is probably our experience, where you have someone who's an experienced coach, has strong opinions, has that sort of consistent mindset of thinking about the problem solving, where we have regular conversations. And that's something we just have to keep in check. And I think that's something that would be a good takeaway or a take home for people listening, coaches, athletes, is like, where is your client or your clients on that spectrum? Or where are you as a client on that spectrum or as an athlete on that spectrum? And how can you not get in your own way? That would be the biggest thing. And so to kind of segue into the prep, did you feel like there were maybe any like key moments or key elements where you kind of look back and go, okay, I did that, or I feel like I could have done that better with that dynamic?
In this prep, no, not really. I don't think, other than all of the changes we had to make for bench press due to my shoulder exploding, that was more like problem solving with how do we actually get to the competition without, being able to bench anything, right?
Yep.
Other than that stuff, I don't think this one was too bad. But I noticed myself doing it immediately post-comp. And yeah, I think that's something that I'm going to have to just like keep in check moving forward.
But like I said to you, like referencing those voice messages we've actually had recently, it comes down to actually me putting structures in place as well. So the thing, just straight up, the thing I've suggested is that we have conversations, roughly a week out from the end of blocks to get ideas off the chest and voice them and put them up in the air without actually solidifying anything in particular. That gives you the ability to express those ideas, and then me time to take those ideas, still make them my own and put my coaching print on them, and to be able to happily look at it and say, this is where I think we should go with things. Service certain ideas that you've raised, or deny some of them and say, thanks for that, but no, we're not doing that. I think that's a really good method, and that's something that I think for you and I, we just need to stick to. But we've obviously already chatted about that. But having a method where the balance is struck consistently would be underrated.
Yeah, and I have a very similar relationship with a client of mine, Sam Hall, who's been coaching about as long as me. Actually, I think a little bit longer than me as well. And he has his own biases where he comes from, and he has his own thought processes. And I come from quite different thought processes than he does. And we always discuss things like well before we make a change, and we agree on a happy medium. And whenever we do agree, it always goes really well. Whenever we go too far into what I think and he doesn't quite buy into it, it doesn't go as well. And the same thing vice versa. Whenever we go too far into what he wants to do, it doesn't go as well.
It's quite fluid.
So I think like being able to understand where the person's coming from, like actually ask them why they think a certain change is going to be a good change. I think that's really important. It's like if I have a client who comes to me and says, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z in the next block, I will say, like, I'm open to it if you can convince me. Like if you can convince me that this is something that would actually improve your training, then I'm all for it. Like I'm all for making any change in anyone's program, just about, like, as long as it's not fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm quite similar. It's like that anti-dogma mindset where it's like we understand a lot can work.
Yeah.
And I think that not only that a lot can work, but buy-in is, again, underrated. And it's one of the key things when it comes to people executing their program to the highest standard.
This is what you see when someone changes to a new coach. And we've definitely spoken about this concept before. The reason things go well with that new coach is because you have convinced yourself that you've made the right decision.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Oftentimes. And you've bought into this new process that this coach has.
Yeah.
And you're doing all of the little things.
Sleeping right,
eating protein, spacing out your meals, all that stuff, smashing your accessories. You're doing it. That's why it works. It doesn't work because this new coach is a magician. It works because you want to prove to yourself that you made the right decision and you actually bought into it all.
Yeah. So really, I think a nice little summary of all of that is that the dynamic really matters. That, for the most part, the athlete holds a lot of the cards, or the client holds a lot of the cards in regard to like accepting the coach coaching, not overstepping boundaries, doing all these things that they should be doing for the recovery to make the most of the thing in front of them as if this was a brand new coach, And if someone's able to do that block after block, cycle after cycle, then that same relationship can continue to flourish and grow the strength and the abilities of that lifter. That's a pretty neat little summary there, and it's rather simple. I think that it will be good also to reflect on, okay, if it wasn't the dynamic, if our dynamic was working really well throughout this prep, which I would actually agree, what was some of the things that you felt made the day come undone for you, relatively, compared to where our expectations were?
Well, how I've written down these notes was in chronological order. Do you want to go through?
What's next?
Do you want to go through it chronologically, and then we'll get to that?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
For sure. So we'll just sideline that for a moment. But what's next?
So what we essentially started this prep with was 3 blocks of 7 weeks leading into the comp. So that final 7 weeks was like the last block. There was a holiday in the middle, and there was 2 7-week blocks before the holiday. I actually felt like those first 2 blocks before the holiday were like outstanding, and I built great momentum. I felt like I was really, really locked into the goal, and I was like doing the daily posts where I post my training. I was really excited about like showing off what I've done. I was really like proud of the work that I was putting in, and it was, every little last bit of effort into every single set.
And it will be fair to say that the structure was working well and it was being applied to well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And we actually reran the second last block again. And I think the fork in the road moment was when I hit those unplanned PBs. So I deadlifted 300.
And the plan that day was?
The plan that day was a 2x1 at 260.
260.
So I did the 2x1, and then I jumped straight to 300 and got it. And I was fucking stoked. I didn't tell Matt that I was going to do it, and he called me immediately after and was like, nice job, well done.
Yes.
And then the following Monday, I squatted 265, which was a 2.5 PB.
Yep.
And
I think the plan that day was up to 260.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that one wasn't too far off.
It wasn't crazy, but it wasn't. They were both like to be just blank. They were both off plan.
Yep.
It was not the intention.
Yep.
And you keep talking on that because I'm going to talk about what the intention was.
Yeah. And then to cap off that week, I hit a 155 bench. And for those of you that don't know, I had an MRI on my shoulder in November last year. Basically did no barbell benching for about 8-week period. Slowly brought it back in. That was my first time over 150 in about 10 months, I think. So 155.
Yeah, we'd had heaps of time down.
Very, very stoked with that.
Yeah.
So that gave me, I think, 720. That was my training total. Obviously, all 3 of those lifts were done on different days. A little bit heavier in body weight, didn't have to weigh in, all that kind of stuff.
But it's good to explain that because that is the strength position you're in before a week away and another block.
Yeah. So then I went away to New Zealand. I had one of my best mates' weddings, and I had the kids with me, and it was complete mayhem in terms of like scheduling. I could not get to the gym.
No training. Yeah.
So I did no training. I actually did no training for, I think it was 12 days.
Yep.
So it was almost 2 weeks because we left on the Monday. I finished training on the Friday the week before. On our way back, which was a Monday morning, Chrissy really hurt her back. So I had to stay at home with the kids for a couple of days because she was really struggling. So I didn't start my following block until like a Wednesday or a Thursday. So I was already behind the 8 ball. And I think the first thing that went wrong was, I think the first thing that went wrong actually before we even go into the last block was hitting those PBs before I went away almost felt like the job was done. To me, and I didn't realize this in the moment. I didn't realize this until after the competition, that it almost felt like I didn't commit to those final 7 weeks of the prep.
Would you call it complacency?
Absolutely. I think that's what I wrote in the notes. 100% complacency. It was like, I've achieved, essentially what I wanted to hit on the day in terms of squat and deadlift, like 265, 300. I would have been absolutely stoked with those. I've already done those. So if I've already done those, like how important is this next phase of training?
Yeah, I'll just cruise. I'll just make it in.
And I certainly took my foot off the accelerator. But I think the big thing that really threw a spanner in the works for me was my first session back bench pressing, like sharp pain in my left shoulder, seemingly out of nowhere.
Which is not the shoulder we were dealing with before.
Yeah. So the shoulder that I'd recovered from previously was my right shoulder. That was the one I got the MRI on last year. Just seemingly out of nowhere after I benched 155, a week prior without any pain. My shoulder just immediately started hurting. And I'm like, this fucking sucks, but I'm going to suck it up and do my sets. I did all my sets that day. I did all my sets on the second bench day. And then it was kind of the following week where I was like, this is actually an issue. Like, this is a problem. And when I wasn't able to like fully train the way that I wanted to, it was kind of like another excuse for me to take the foot off the gas with all the stuff. Like, even though my squats were going okay, my deadlifts were going well, not being able to do what I wanted on bench was almost a second excuse for me to get even more complacent.
I think just a tangent on that this is like, at the end of the day, we're talking about human beings. So this is like a good insight into how, non-robotic everybody is in reality and how these things can understandably occur. And I think that it's good to kind of layer it like that, where we go, okay, let's say that we had executed that second to last block as it was intended, which, like, from my point of view, the idea was to give you that ability to have momentum and have something to take and something to work towards in that final block, which in hindsight, we're both able to say, okay, taking those numbers that you were able to do too early did take away from that almost mental want to then find that out. And I think the timing of that really, really matters. And that's probably what we mean when we say building momentum in a comp prep, is like, when we say that, I know for me as a lifter, it's often that I hit a really good lift, but there was room and there's something to look forward to. That's exactly what it means, actually.
It's almost looking forward to the next session.
Yeah, and that's what momentum...
about the next 10 kilos.
And that's what momentum actually is, because momentum isn't just, I had momentum into now. It's then also facilitating the next and the next. I think that's a really, really important note. And I'd say that would be the key thing that got stolen from us by getting a little trigger happy with those off-program loads. Even though the other side of my, like, the sort of double barrel of it is, like, I will always congratulate my lifters for PRing and doing great, because that's what we're training for. I'm really happy for you as a person to achieve, like, what was a milestone lift. A lot of people, that's a lifetime goal, hitting 300. I wasn't going to, be like, oh man, what do you mean? It's important for me to balance the human. So I think I was saying that the human side of it.
It robbed us of momentum.
Yeah, so it would be fair to say that those lifts definitely robbed us of that momentum a little bit. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I actually had another point to add on that while you were talking, Matty. There was, now that I think about it, I didn't even realize this until now that we're actually like reviewing the game tape. There was a lot of question marks for me around that period in that last block, which almost led me to want to kind of see what was there, because I didn't actually feel that strong on squats in particular. And that PR was like, I was so proud to do it because I wasn't sure whether I was actually strong enough to do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think in most cases when people go off program, it's like, no, I know I can do this. Like, that's an excuse for me to go off program. I know it's there. Whereas for me, it was like proving to myself that I actually was at the level that I needed to be at. Yeah. It wasn't like I'm going to max out, haha. It was almost like prove to myself that like all of this training was actually working.
That's right. And I think that it's important, like on a personal level for you, to reflect on whatever the thoughts and feelings were that like lead you to doing that. Because I think we can all sit here and understand that, like, regularly or not, going off a plan is diverting from the intention, of course, and so, in a lot of cases, you're going to get a different effect, and it just creates that mishmash of things that are going on. And it's quite easy to, I guess, like justify things in your own head because, at the end of the day, if we're left to our own devices, we're going to be like somewhat self-serving and go, yeah, this is right for me because X, Y, and Z. And it's quite easy to talk yourself into that. But it's good and it's important for us to be able to reflect on it and look at like, okay, that was with a short-term lens. That was with a short-term mindset, and it categorically affected things that were important or moderate or long-term lensed, so to speak. I think that, again, is a great take-home when it just comes to, we always talk about the runway. Like creating a runway into certain events or certain, max outs or whatever it's going to be. And, if you think about the runway, like a plane taking off and you have like an early stoppage, right? It's going to have an effect on the end outcome. We have to make sure we build up speed appropriately so we can get that really nice takeoff when the time is right. And you can kind of frame that however which way you want, but it's just important to recognize that, like we said, powerlifting is not this weekend to weekend to weekend thing. It's a much longer build-up time, and it almost brings us back to how important each building block is to kind of create that bigger structure. So from a point of view of what positives can we take away, a huge amount. As long as we don't let the experiences like fade in our memory and make the same mistakes again. That's all. And I think that's the very essence of any coach-client relationship is going, let's do this thing. Great. Oh, blunder. Okay. Fool me once, right? Leave that. We've learned our lesson. Let's not do that again, right? And it really falls somewhat on both of our shoulders to do our roles to make sure that we know who you are, how you behave, what your weaknesses and what your strengths are. Play to your strengths, protect you from your weaknesses.
Totally.
Pretty good, like, summary of it in simple terms, right? Is being able to, and when people talk about, coaching and individualizing for the athlete, it's like, in my mind, that's not like, well, he does high bar 10s and this is this, and, she does 3 times squats a week. Like, that's great. For me, that's like the very basic individualization. The more abstract individualization in coaching is, do I know you as a person? And do I know what your tendencies are? And how can I help you protect you from yourself in a lot of ways to make sure that you can grow and be your best? I think that's a strong part of individualization as a coach.
I actually think that the psychological aspect of coaching is the essence of individualization. It is actually like understanding how to get the most out of an individual by knowing them, knowing their biases, knowing what they need psychologically.
100%.
More than knowing what they need physiologically.
Yeah. It's even like
any coach can write a good program.
Right.
Any coach who is coaching at, a level, coaching online, everyone has the same tools in the toolbox. Everyone has the same tips and tricks. Yeah. Actually getting to know someone on a personal level and understanding them and asking the right questions and picking up information from them is how you figure out the nuts and bolts.
And what's funny about that is that oftentimes those are the elements that might create like a unique subset of strategies in a program that you look at and you go, oh, how'd you land there? It's like, because he's this kind of guy. So this is the thing.
Yeah, it's like why Chris's program's fucking crazy because he's a nutbag.
Yeah.
He's putting his thumbs up.
So for whatever reason, it could be you have a very pessimistic or a very optimistic client, or you have someone who really requires X to be confident and this one really doesn't. And so you're playing to certain strengths and weaknesses. And that is a massive part of the learning as a coach. So I look at this experience, we've talked about yourself in this experience and things that maybe have gone off the rails and there's been some complacency. And then I kind of do my own reflection and review of what I can do better and bringing strategies to you, not just coming back and being like, well, that wasn't my plan. You cooked it, man. I could say that very easily, but it's important for me to come and take some responsibility and say, well, knowing you as a person, knowing that you have the best possible intentions for yourself, how can I better serve you and put things in front of you that help to steer you away from those tendencies that we both know are a thing? So yeah, I definitely see it as a growing opportunity, and it makes me really, really excited for the next comp to be able to not only take, you've done 265, you've done 157.5 in the gym week 4 competition, and you've done 300. So I'm really excited by the fact that I know your strength is in an amazing place, and then to be able to runway you into the comp and actually have that enjoyable day you should have had. Yeah. The last note I'll make about kind of competition day is And maybe I won't start with it. I'll ask you your thoughts. And I know you've got
Yep.
like a bit of a script for us to go through.
That's
But
okay. I'm just checking my
when it
notes.
comes to a competition day where, okay, we'd come through, we'd had a really good block pre-comp block, and we'd had a sound block in the comp block itself. We'd problem solved a lot of bench and shoulder stuff. So just to quickly recap that, myself and Claudia put our heads together around some tech changes to better suit Alex's anatomy, to help alleviate stress off the part of his shoulder that was hurting, and we had a lot of success with that. We also believe it's the way forward in regard to bench press tech, and we were able to bench press 157.5 the week out from competition over at BT, and so it was a major success in terms of problem solving that. On the day, you got 157.5 up, got 2 reds, unfortunately, for various technicalities. But in regard to that outcome, that was really cool. But I think being able to, consider what the not goals are for the next kind of venture, but being in a mindset of where we're going, mindful of what that experience was, and learning about. Oh, that's where I was going. On the competition day, coming in, so to kind of go back to where I was going, coming in on the competition day, could we have done anything better for you on the day itself? So prep's one thing, comp day itself, what are your thoughts there? Obviously, we mis-executed on, I'd say, 2 fronts, squat and deadlift. Bench press, I'm really happy with the selection. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I was actually watching my comp videos today to try to re-remember the day as it happened. I think the only decision that was actually one that I would take back was the deadlift.
Yep.
I don't think I would change the decision we made on squat. Watching my second attempt back, it looked to me like I had 10 kilos. We took 10 kilos. It wasn't there on the day. Bench press, I think, was fine. I actually locked out the 157, just misgrooved it a little bit and kind of had to fight, and my ass came up and I got 2 reds from the sides. But I was perfectly fine with that. The decision on deadlift was well, this day sucks. All that will make it better is deadlifting 300.
A Hail Mary.
And it was I probably had 292. I maybe had 295. And if I could have my time back, I'd probably attempt 292 just for a comp PB and for 700 kilos.
Yep.
But that's hindsight, right?
Yep.
In the moment, it was I literally don't give a shit about anything. I've hit the qualifying total on the second deadlift, and it's fuck it, just put 300 on.
Yeah.
And that was my decision. That wasn't your decision. And I'm totally happy to wear that because, I think even in the moment I knew, probably not going to get it, but whatever.
I literally came over to you because after the second, and in my mind, I was, if you were to ask me, what do you think? I was thinking maximum 10 more kilos. And that small comp PR attempt, I think, was what we probably would have gone for. And I remember coming over to you. You weren't looking at me at all. You just thought I'd just throw down 3 anyways. And I come over and I was like, oh, so what do you think? You pretty much were just fucking bro, 300. I don't want anything else. I think it's roughly what you said.
I said load it, and you said load what? And I said 300. And then I just walked away.
I was like, I bet.
Yeah. He's going to miss.
300 for Alex, please.
You should have put in 400. It would have been the same.
So that, and again, for the coaches out there, I've been through various times in my career as a coach where on comp day, I've been you will do what I say, real army with it, right? You are going to lift the numbers I tell you, I'll be asking you how you feel, that's it. And I think I've grown as a coach a lot where at the end of the day, it's the athlete's experience. It's the athlete's day. I'm actually a facilitator, right? I'm not there to be a dictator. I'm there to actually facilitate your day. If you want to give 300 to stab my guy, let's roll. If you hit it too, man, I'm going to be there celebrating that shit. But also, I'm aware of what the probabilities are. And I think at the end of the day, that comes down to, it's pretty athlete-led. We're always going to have a conversation pre-competition to be hey, how are we going to call these shots? And again, for someone who's more experienced on the platform, more experienced as a coach, and might I say, as a coach, and generally for yourself too, when you're being really, really honest with yourself, you're very good at number calling. So as a coach, I would say one of the best. As an athlete for yourself, a little bit worse than as a coach, but still
way worse.
But still quite good.
Go look at my open powerlifting, everyone, and go laugh at me.
But still quite good when you're being caveat, when you're being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
When you're just being shit cunt, not so much. But that same goes for anyone, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important one too, and that's another place we'll grow over time. Is will more and more and more of the reins get handed over to me to make those calls
Yeah.
at various competitions, like say in nationals. I'm sure it would be a bit more that way.
Yeah.
But that's another one too, where it's like, okay, when you do have that competition that goes a certain way, do we really not care about that third pull? Or would it have been cooler to get a little PR and be like, there's my win today, for example,
leave
right?
on a
Like,
win. Yeah, absolutely.
and that's up to each individual. Some people genuinely go, no, like just run it. I don't care. And I will not care later. If you look back at it and go, actually, like in hindsight, I kind of wish I would have gone for a small PR on deadlifts just to be like, because that's what I preach, or that's what's this, that's whatever, then cool. And that's another place we'll potentially grow, you know?
I think,
Because we haven't had a lot of comps together.
yeah, that was only the second one.
Yeah.
I think another thing, because I have done so many comps, that was my 22nd comp. This is my 11th year competing. I'm okay with missing a lift knowing that I'm going to compete again. It doesn't really matter as much.
And that's what we said before about the team sport thing.
Yeah, but also, because of that experience, I should probably be better at going, this is what I have today. And being better at, thinking like, okay, I may want 300 kilos, but don't have 300 kilos in me today. What should the actual attempt be?
I feel like it's a double-edged sword. You can either be like, it's my 22nd comp, so like, it'll blend in, I'll just do another one, like, don't worry about it, just run it,
Yeah.
Or it's like, it's my 22nd comp, like, I'm that experienced guy, and I'm always going to take what's there in the day because I've done 22 comps. Like, it's one or the other, right? And it can be either of those on whichever day.
And it's funny because my coaching strike rate is so much better than my competitive strike rate. It's like, it's crazy, the difference.
Yeah. Like, your average from a coaching point of view would probably be like 7.5 to 8 out of 9.
I would say easily over 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and I'm not really too sure what that is, whether it's just like, yeah, I'm not really too sure.
It's, I know what it is. It's that you're less emotional when you're making decisions for your lifters. That would 100% be it.
Yeah, more
like
objective.
You're genuinely thinking, and it's long-term mindset. So you're genuinely able to look down the road. So like take like guys like you and guys like Jesse and whatnot and Spacco. You're like, wow, okay, like I know where this is going. I know what they need to go there. And you make that decision for them. And you put those constraints in place. Do you have any clients who would or do challenge you like that?
Honestly, less than I used to, and
Yep.
I think that comes with my experience.
Yep.
I think my clients respect my opinion more now than ever.
Yep.
Which I think is normal. Like, as you do something longer, you get less questioning coming back at you.
Yep.
Like, even in a programming context, very often I will get someone questioning what I'm doing. Whereas when I was starting out, it was a lot of trying to like explain myself and prove myself and
Yep.
Explain my reasoning to people. And yeah, on comp day, I still will have discussions with my lifter, and we always usually like end up agreeing somewhere in the middle, and we run it. But I have definitely in the past experienced lifters who wanted to do more.
Yeah.
And when I was less experienced as a coach, I would like buy into it a little bit, and then they'd miss, and we go, oh well. And I think I learned from that early on, and I don't think I was a very good comp coach 7 or 8 years ago.
Yep.
And I think that's part of what makes me a good comp coach now, is that I've made horrible decisions in the past. I've written horrible comp plans in the past, and I've learned from them. I've watched a lot of powerlifting. I've seen a lot of bad competition plans. I've seen a lot of bad competition performances, been involved in a lot of them, and that's made me better at it.
For sure. 100%. So how does someone with so much experience and with so many lessons as a coach help themselves get better at making those decisions as the athlete? Or do they release some of the power in that moment?
Well, yeah, I think that I need to release all of it. And I said this to you before the comp. I said on squats in particular, because on squats I've been quite conservative in the past few years of like, let's just take a little bit less than I think I can do, so I lock it in. And in my last 2 comps, I squatted 260 and 262.5, and they were both actually quite easy. Like, I had probably 5 kilos in both instances. Whereas this time it was like, I actually told you what I thought I had, and it was a little bit too much. So, but I also said to you before the comp, like, don't let me pussy out on squats and like make the right call for what you think I have. And
Yep.
you actually asked me when I said, I reckon probably plus 10. You were like, do you think that you're being a bit too conservative here? And I said, no, I actually do think I've only got 10.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely think handing over more of the reins to you will help me make more lifts in the future. But like I said earlier, there's such a fine line between a bad day and a great day.
Absolutely.
Like, something that I wanted to touch on earlier was, because my final block was complacent, I wasn't getting through a lot of the work that was prescribed, and there was just a general like nonchalance around training. I think that put me in a place on the platform where I didn't really feel like I deserved to be there, because I'd never been on the platform after not giving my all in a prep. Like, I'm someone who usually turns the dial up in the last 8 or 10 weeks.
Yeah,
leading
it's
into a comp.
often like you've
And
commented
that's normal,
that
right?
having for you, it definitely is that you've noted that when you have something to work towards, like a competition, that is the thing that makes you, if you're not already, really do everything to the highest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And in this instance, it was actually the opposite. Because I'd hit those big numbers beforehand, gone on holiday, hurt my shoulder, felt sorry for myself, but also felt like I'd accomplished something hitting those PBs. The foot was off the gas. And then by the time I got to the comp, it was like I hadn't trained the way that I'm used to training into a competition.
You can't fake confidence.
It was almost like it was almost like I didn't deserve to be there, and I hadn't earned the right to be on
like
that
an
platform.
imposter kind of.
Yeah, totally. And I think like that's also part of the reason why I was going probably a little bit over the top with the G-ups, is like I was almost masking that and like trying to fake the confidence a little bit.
Yep.
And I think, I really think it comes down to like my performance comes down to those last 7 or 8 weeks where I just didn't put the polish on the prep.
100%.
I almost like took a slight back step.
Yeah, and I think that what it shows us is that training should always be malleable to circumstances, and we should be able to adjust training to fit certain lifestyles, and that's always available, right? So an adjustment to training is always available if it's needed, outside of just like laziness, just not wanting to do it, right? And then from there, just completing what's on paper has merit in 2 ways. One, it's got an intention and it has a physical outcome. And then 2, what you just touched on, is it's checking a box and it's completing a prep. It's a prep, you're in preparation.
But it's
right?
also 3. It tells you whether what's written worked or not.
Totally.
If you write a training block for me and I don't do half of it, we don't know if the training block you wrote actually worked or didn't work.
And you know what's very interesting is, so just so everyone knows, I didn't know Hayes was missing out some of his training during those weeks whilst they were happening. I found out afterwards. And what's interesting is during that phase, I was thinking to myself a few times,
Coward.
What's going on? Like some of your training was really, really good. Some of it was looking a little bit worse. And I was like, okay, like it's not looking quite the same as that previous block for one reason or another. Maybe it was a week away. Not sure what's going on. And I had a few just moments to myself where I was just wondering, if what I was putting in front of you was right. And it makes more sense now that certain things and a couple of quite meaningful things in the program were being missed out. That almost reassures me in a lot of ways
absolutely.
that my thinking was actually on the right spot. And our previous blocks that had gone really, really nicely, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like we know we're currently in a phase of training where we are doing certain things that are a little bit different to that, but we should come back to those things that work really well with some changes that, you and I have discussed. But that's actually very reassuring in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think we've covered heaps there. I think there's a lot of takeaways.
There was one more thing I had written down.
For sure, yeah.
Which was that I did feel a little bit out of touch with the comp environment itself.
There you go. Yep.
My previous competition was 19 months before this one.
Yeah, wow.
And then my one before that was 11 months before that one.
And that comes as a product of, being a dad
busy, having kids,
of young kids.
Stuff,
and all the rest of it, which is just, that's fine.
A lot of it was also the APU system, the way that it was all set up with the local, state, national thing.
The what system?
Yeah. The who? The way that it was all set up, where if you wanted to go to nationals, you had to do states. If you wanted to go to states, you had to do local. Didn't have the time and opportunity to do 3 comps in a year to get to nationals.
I'm sure many people listening are like nodding along.
And
right
then
now.
by the time nationals came around, it was like there was no other choices for me. So it was like, okay, when am I going to do this comp?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's like 3 local comps in Sydney. That one doesn't work for this reason.
So
that
for
one
one
doesn't
reason
work
or
for this
another,
reason. Yeah.
You had been out of touch with it. And if all those things we've already chatted on that we've just stacked on top of each other didn't exist, went away, shot up, just imploded when you came back, the momentum killer with the complacency. If you didn't have all of that and you just had this like 19, 20 months off of competition, you could already see a possibility for like just not having the best day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors that have kind of climbed in here. And we can put some of them to bed by doing things and put others to bed by, competing more frequently.
Getting on the platform again. And I, although this was my 11th year competing, last year was actually the first year in that entire time period where I didn't do a competition. So prior to that, it was 3 comps a year, 2, 3, 2, 4, 3. It was a lot of competition. So by the time I was getting up on the platform, it was, I felt like I belonged. It felt normal. It felt natural. Whereas this time around, it was, how long do I have to my last warm up? Okay, what song should I put on at this point? What, how should I be firing myself up like this? Now I was a little bit out of touch with the rhythms. Even though I've been to a million competitions, coached at a million competitions, spotted, loaded, refereed, blah, 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 whatever, there's something different about being the one whose name is called and then getting up 100%. On there. I think, the plan now is to compete in November, which I think is like 18 and a half weeks away now. I've already got stuck back into training, and I think like having these conversations and these realizations around where I dropped the ball during prep, and this was totally 100% on me, my doing, not on you, Maddie, at all. It's actually made me want to do it all again properly. And like, I've got like more motivation and fire than I've had in a long while. And yeah, that's exciting.
Definitely. And look, just to touch on the time away from competition, I've also experienced this. Like, I'll just very quickly touch on my recent prep. I had about, I think, like 16 months since my last competition before my comp at Hunter.
Was that the Nationals at Gold Coast? Was that the last one?
No, I did a perf local in like Feb of last year. So it was just over a year. It was like maybe 14 months or something like that. Okay. And I honestly had a pretty flawless prep. I don't think I could have changed anything about how I prepared, but I still had moments and things that sort of didn't come together, as I wanted them to on that comp day. And it was a very similar feeling of just like, let me just like rerun this, pretty soon, which is what I'm doing. I'm competing like 7-8 weeks, for the same sorts of reasons. It's actually not an element of like practicing lifting, but the experience of a competition day, the rhythm of the day, the autonomy of the day, like it does come from doing more comps. And just because you have done a bunch of them, like I have done a bunch of comps too, you can't just stack them and go, well, I have now and I'm just good to go and wait 3 years and compete again. Like you almost have to start over in a way if you have enough of a time off.
And also the time away from doing like a quote unquote peak or a prep period where you try and like expose what the top end is also very different as well. Like it had been such a long time for me, and that's part of the reason why I took those lifts that were out of pocket in that second last block.
The more we talk about it, the more it makes sense why it happened.
Yeah, it was because it was like, fuck, I haven't touched 260 in 16 months. Like, can I still do it? I don't know if I can still do it.
What's crazy about
that? To make myself believe that I can still do it.
22 comps in, you did what a first-timer, novice person does, which is goes, I want to touch the weight that I think I can do because I'm not sure if I can.
Yeah.
And we joke about that.
I fucking meme everyone who does that shit.
You literally did it, like, right?
I'm a meme.
You're that guy.
Meme.
But it's also like fine, and then being able to look at it and go, oh, I did that, and like how funny is that? And
yeah, I think the difference in this scenario is like, I am admitting it was a mistake and admitting the fault and like looking introspectively at what went wrong and what the causes were and what the effects were, and figuring out how to figure it out next time.
And let's go a little further with that, because I think this is what's really important about coach-client relationships and also friendships within that. We sat down for dinner straight after competition and we had a chat. And the first thing that you raised, you started talking about the program. You didn't start talking about ownership of things. You went straight to that place of trying to kind of talk about some solutions and things you thought might work, which is exactly what everyone does. But we took enough time, we sat with it for a bit, and we eventually got to a place where some of those other things started coming up and we spoke about those things. Most people don't get there. They go, oh, but you know, it was this fault, it was this thing's fault. And they focus on that and they don't take any ownership and they go that way. And then that doesn't work out, it's this thing's fault. You know, so I think it's really, really good and something that's very commendable that you were also able to come to that place, go, actually, this, I can do this better. And I think this was actually a very, very big part of why they didn't go that way.
Yeah.
So
I think another point that I didn't have on the sheet that I've just thought of is external stuff, like how I used to train when I didn't have children and I barely had a job is very, very different to how I can train now and how much recovery capability I have and blah, blah, blah. That's not an excuse. It's just a constant now in my life.
Yeah.
And it's like a different reality to before. So like, you know, I think most powerlifters who have it tough in terms of like fitting their training in and recovering from training and getting enough sleep and all that kind of stuff would point to those as reasons for why things didn't go well. But in this instance, like, I can't change any of that.
No.
And I'm not going to be able to change any of that until Milo's sleeping through the night and not breastfeeding anymore. And he's, you know, probably 18 months from now. Yeah. And in 18 months from now, it's going to get even easier. So it's going to be even better.
100%. But as well, like, I think it's good that you allude to that as, okay, which one is more important for me to address? The thing I can control, the thing I can't control. And it's obvious when you say it like that. But you can think of a number of people who are either shift workers, have kids themselves, who are national champions or endurance case world champion, right? There are examples of people who have these externals that occur and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You can work with it and adjust the plan. Like I said before, it's all malleable. It's the point is not to go in and do 5 3-hour sessions a week. That's not the point. The point is to be doing a plan to its fullest and executing it consistently and building your confidence, right? And that can occur in most circumstances. And being able to just accept that, like you said, there's certain things you can change and certain things you can't change. And perhaps, you know, over the coming years, things might get better from an environment standpoint. There might be other things that come into your life. You know, you never know. It's fine. But I can think of a lot of people who do like shift work and whatnot, who like aren't perfectly recovered and they're still able to do things and achieve and get better. And I think that's like kind of what we're getting at, is being able to look at the things that matter, look at the things that you cannot change and work with them.
Yeah, like there's certain things that go on in your life that you can't change, but then there's also certain things in the program that are non-negotiable. And that's how you have to look at them, as like,
totally.
No matter what happens in my life, fuck, I got 3 hours sleep last night. Well, I've still got to do my squat and deadlift session.
100%.
And like I look at someone like Adam Jones, who's like a great example.
Massive.
He has 2 young boys. His family seems to get gastro like once a month and his whole family's just fucked. And he never misses training. And he always turns up and does it. And man, he like deadlifts like 320 in his garage with his son next to him. Yep. Never made an excuse in his life.
Yep.
And I look at that and I'm like, cool, if Jonesy can do it, I can do it.
100%. And like I gave Jones as an example as well, like there's been some cool little backstories about him, his family life, you know, how much his wife supports him. And like, you know, he rolls in from his like finance job. I'm pretty sure he's got like a big finance job. Rolls in, she's like got the garage like heated up and like, cause they're in the UK, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, UK.
And he's got this finite window where he's allowed to train, and then like, you know, she's got dinner for him. So she's a massive support to ensure he can do that. So like your support network matters as well. And then obviously there's some parenting responsibilities, and then, okay, now you're the dad for the next however many hours. Like that, all that stuff is personal for him, but he's also said, oh, look, I couldn't do this without this person, you know, which is a whole other topic. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like in the past when I would prep for comps, it would be like, cool, I've got all this downtime where I usually like waste time or do whatever. I would fill that downtime with like sleeping extra. Whereas now I just don't have that choice.
Yep.
So it's like, cool, this is what I have at my disposal. I'm just going to make the best of it, the best available, you know, of those resources.
Yep.
All right. We got a few questions on the Instagram. A few people trolling me. Josh Lanivia trolling me for my moustache. Fuck you, Josh. I'll ask his question first.
Yeah,
I'll ask his actual...
he seemed like really excited about the podcast. He was like, I can't wait for the questions I asked.
I'll ask his non-trolly question, even though there's a bit of a jab in there.
Oh, yeah.
With you competing since the ancient times, there's the jab, do you get nervous on the platform? Me personally, nervous? No, nervous is the wrong word. I think, like I said before, in this instance, I had a little bit of that imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't really deserve to be there because I hadn't put the work in. But I don't think that made me nervous. What about you, Maddie? Do you get nervous?
Yeah, I get nervous. For me, it's usually in the lead up to competition, like maybe the week of. Like my training's my training, and there are certain sets and certain moments I get nervous for in training. And then usually, when things are all aligned and things are in a good spot, there's a nice settle that happens just after weigh-in. Usually for me, I just settle in, I start warming up, and I'm actually very calm and relaxed when all things created equal. And I think that comes from having a prep where you've ticked all the boxes, and also competing regularly and being in the groove. So yes, but not in a way that's problematic most of the time.
Yeah. I think for me, like, I get the most nervous like a day or two before. In my training, I don't really have the time in my day to think about my top sets. Like when I used to have all the time in the world, as I've mentioned, it would be like, cool, I'm squatting X number or X RPE today. Think about it the whole day. The moment, like, I don't have time to even think about my training until the moment I train. And then I maybe get like a little bit nervous before my top set for like a minute, and then I'm fine. And I think that's actually really helpful for me. I used to get quite anxious, because it would just play my mind. And now, like, I guess like experience is probably some of that, but I also think like just, not having the actual time to sit down and get nervous, and get nervous. Always doing something else.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
All right. Next question from Joe Mundy. Shout out Joe Mundy, Potsy's client, just competed in New Zealand. I don't know if you saw him Potsy's stories.
Yeah, so
did very well. What are your thoughts on taper weeks? Just did a comp where most people came in seemingly undertrained and lifted below their training numbers on the platform.
So I'll attack this in two sort of angles. I think that people coming in and lifting less than what they did in training is quite common, especially if you look at the higher performance level. And I say common, respective to... let's say, for instance, someone squats like 250 at an RPE 8. I'm not saying they're going to squat less than 250 at a competition. I mean, like, relative to what they could have, or if they did something more maximally in training. I think some of those reasons are that we create perfect training environments for ourselves, which we should. And we also put ourselves in a perfect position when it comes to things like hydration and feeding and body weight. And oftentimes, people are cutting weight for competitions. They're in environments that are not exactly like their perfect training environment. They're on time constraints. They have the rules that they have to abide by with referees deciding on whether they're at standard or not. All these things coming together, it's not that uncommon for someone to take like a squat-only day where they peak perfectly for that day and ticked all those boxes, and maybe it was like just on the slightly high side, and squat 5 kilos under performance or something in competition with all those things in mind. So I think that's a really big one. Less commonly do I see that it looks like someone tapered too hard and they're genuinely detrained. I think that's quite uncommon. I think it's also quite hard to do. I think it's more probable that you see that with like elite level lightweight lifters, because we do see that the trends there are that they rely a little bit more on lift frequency to see top end consistency. I know with Vicky training out at Breakthrough, she's commented a few times on very small, seemingly small changes in a program to intensity and frequency, making a pretty decent effect on top end, whereas you don't see that as much for your middle and heavier weight people. So coming back to the question, it's pretty much, what do you think about tapers, right?
Let me check.
You're right.
What are your thoughts on taper weeks?
Yeah. So taper weeks, I feel indifferent about. I think that taper weeks can be very big taper weeks, very significant taper weeks, or very insignificant. And I think that at the end of the day, that should be bent to the current state of the lifter and the overall plan and how they've responded to tapers of a similar sort of intention in the past. And I'm also very for no tapers. More commonly, I find myself using no tapers for my female athletes and my sort of lighter to middleweight female athletes, because I find that it's more reliable in terms of predicting top end strength, and also even just feelings of strength and consistency for the lifter themselves. I have also run lifters into competitions, some of the like 93 class, 105 class men, without any taper at all, and it's still been fine, because again, it should reflect the prep. you're not going to bury someone and not taper them. You would reflect the intensity of the prep, and the progression of the prep would reflect that you aren't going to taper. You'd be sort of running into the competition. So the answer to it is like very, very, it depends.
Yeah.
And ultimately, indifferent. Tapers are great. You can work without them. Depends on the lifter. There are a few trends and things that are consistent, like the weight, weight and size, strength, and those sorts of things that would inform your decision. But that's kind of my roundabout answer, and hopefully answers that pretty well.
Yeah. I think my take on this is similar to you. I think I'm a little bit more in the camp of stripping things back more than you do. I also think that it's very unlikely that someone comes into a competition detrained, as you mentioned, which is why I tend to lean a little bit more into freshening them up a little bit. I'll tend to give my lifters very little training in the final week, and in particular, very little training for that last 1 or 2 sessions. They might do like some notable training like on a Monday if they're competing on Saturday or Sunday, but then after that, it's very, very easy.
I think where we differ just quickly on that is like, I would prefer to give them more days off and keep the training more substantial than to strip the substance out of the training and keep more training days. That's where I maybe differ.
Yeah.
In terms of like, I would give someone more load or maybe some more volume than you might put into a program, but I might take a day away or something like that, or add an extra rest day or something like that.
I will usually do all of the above. Like I will take away load, I'll take away sets and reps, I'll take away accessories completely, and I'll add extra rest days. Like I'm quite aggressive with how much I take away, because I don't actually think that the likelihood of detraining is very high.
Do you think that reflects how you prep the person too? Do you have a tendency to prep maybe your lifters to a greater intensity, or push them a little bit harder, and that justifies that? Or regardless of how hard you push them, you still kind of sit in that same camp?
I think this was going to be my next point, was that the harder I will push someone, the more I'll taper them.
Yep.
What you're mentioning with the no taper approach is you almost like, if we're thinking about this in RPE terms, across a block, let's say competition week happens in week 5. Those first 4 weeks of the block might be 5, 6, 7, 8. All you've done is a single at 8 on all 3 lifts the week before. You probably don't need a taper. Whereas if you're going to 9, you probably need a taper a little bit. If you're going to 10, you definitely need a taper a little bit. So I think it's certainly reflective of how hard you push someone. My issue with like pushing someone all the way to the limit and then tapering is that it's inconsistent. You don't know where the top end performance is going to be, and it's almost like you're just hoping to recreate what they've done in training. Whereas what we want to do is we want to actually do a little bit less, leave a little bit of room, then allow them to freshen up and actually be able to hit more.
Yeah, and I actually think the bandwidth on an effective taper regarding like days and the detraining element is pretty flexible and pretty wide, and also fairly slow acting in most cases. The only thing I don't like about the tapering side, despite saying that, is that if you had to compare how predictable things are versus like in a block where you consistently do this many weeks and this week is always strong, versus suddenly changing that and doing a taper week into a competition, is I would call that less predictable to some degree. To a problematic extent, I don't think so.
Yes.
But if you were to compare the pair like that, I would say that actually just running the same amount of weeks and having a peak of the block being competition day would be like the most predictable thing you can do.
Yes.
So if we say that, what is the benefit of tapering? And do we think that it is does it cause a substantial difference in performance?
Personally, I love going into competition day feeling like I haven't trained, because training makes me sore and hurts my joints, and lifting hurts more when I feel sore and my joints hurt.
Yep.
So me personally, like I like to do very little on competition week, because I also like being excited to turn up to the competition as well. Like I think like if I'm forced to go into the gym like 2 days out or even the day before, I'm almost like, what am I doing here? I'm competing tomorrow. I like that feeling of like wanting to be in the gym and then like itching to compete, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But I also feel like allowing yourself to mentally take a step away from the gym is also really important here too. We spoke about the psychological aspects of the coaching relationship. I think this is a huge psychological benefit, mental benefit to being away from the gym a little bit, it gives you maybe an extra hour of the night to relax and chill, which might help your recovery.
Yep.
It gives you an extra hour where you're at home and you're able to just kick back on the couch. And
yeah, it's interesting that you touch on like, wanting to not train to feel less sore and kind of feel like you're ready for the day and anticipating the day. To contrast that, I almost feel completely the opposite. So I find in my training blocks at the moment, I come into like, for instance, like my week 4, which is my heaviest week of training. I do 4-week blocks, and I will come into like my day 2, which is high bar day. And I have this saying with Marcellus, which is sore and strong. And on Mondays, which is my secondary squat day, I'm almost always beat up, like so sore through a lot of different muscle groups. But I'm almost always categorically brutally strong. And I think this is like the relationship between fitness and fatigue, where you talk about riding high with regard to fitness and strength. And with that, it's almost always coupled some element of fatigue, be that neural, be that actually musculoskeletal. And so I think that, obviously it depends on the person and what they feel best doing. But I know for myself as the athlete, I am leaning more and more and more towards not wanting to taper at all. So I haven't even had this conversation with myself at this point because I'm really in that mindset of just like letting him run at what he thinks, because he's super proactive with like his thought process around this, and I know he's already got a plan. But if he were to ask me like tomorrow, would you be happy for us just to not taper into like this comp coming up? I'd be like 100%, like no taper, legitimately. I'd be fine warming up on the squat and being like, I'm pretty sore on my legs right now. And that's such a weird contrast to what I think is like the more traditional approach to the heavy taper and coming in so fresh. It's unbelievable. And I think there's space for it all, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think that's what the cool part is. We keep coming back to so many things working. And so I think the thing here, to kind of summarize my thoughts on, what are your thoughts on tapering? What does your athlete think? What do they feel? What makes them feel confident? Because that is going to be a big one. If you genuinely feel less confident warming up for a squat on comp day and you're a little bit sore, we did the wrong thing.
That is my experience, is that like when I'm sore, I'm very like clunky and I'm not fluid. When I'm a bit more recovered, I'm a lot more fluid. I move better and I feel, more confident in what I'm going to be able to do.
As your coach, I think there's a middle ground too, where when you get too recovered and feel too just like not sore at all, there is a place where your movement isn't as good. Say on the squat. So even just like to very, very briefly talk about the squat on competition day, I was making some comments on your early warm-ups about certain like movement and just like making sure you're doing X and Y, because your actually movement didn't look quite as good as you want for squats as you did in some of your best squats or prep set, like your 265. And so I think there's always a middle ground with these things where it's like getting fresh to where you feel good, but maybe like the least amount fresh that would make you feel good to go is where I'd want you to be personally because of those beliefs I have.
I think to touch on the squat for competition, and we didn't mention this before, I think what sapped some of my confidence in my squat in that final block was my shoulder bothering me and affecting my low bar position, and it did hurt the whole time.
Yep.
And I think that's what you were seeing was that upper back position wasn't quite rigid and tight, which was kind of shifting me back and forward on my feet, and I just wasn't quite balanced.
Yeah. So what happens when you like have some issues at the shoulder is it means you just start moving as a junction point at the thoracics, and you really want that to be like a place which is like really meshing with the bar well. And when that happens, it causes you to pretty much just get pushed over really easily and be rocking around on the feet in a way that you don't want to be. I think we know what those things are. But whether, it's only our best guess what the cause of that thing is. It can be a shoulder, or it can be this like idea, like I mentioned, of like when one freshens up, there's like this awesome place. And then like if you do go too far with the taper in theory, right? Not to say that's what we did, but if you do go too far with the taper in theory, like what are the symptoms? Is it that you feel weak? Is it that you feel a little bit off balance? If that you feel a little uncoordinated, like what are the things? And that's important too, because it's not just, I feel fresh, I'm good to go. Well, there's a limiter at some point, So I think that would be another thing I would say is that being able to understand what you get and what you could lose by tapering, and then trying to get that perfect world where you get all the best possible benefits and you lose the least amount of things.
I think the final point I have on the taper thing
Could have done the whole podcast on tapering.
We could have. The final point I have on the tapering question is, a lot of people assume that a taper is like going to magically give them extra kilos. And I think we've seen this in powerlifting too often. Like guys like Chad Wesley Smith, who would like literally add 30 kilos to their squat or 40 kilos to what they've done in training on the platform. And we expect that of ourselves. Like when we're lighter weight lifters, we expect that of ourselves.
Super compensation, bro.
And I think that super compensation dream impacts the competition plan, which then impacts the competition attempt selection, and then it impacts the competition outcome.
And then you might say, oh, X about the taper, whereas it was nothing to do with that.
Yeah, whereas your taper set an unrealistic expectation of your thoughts on what the taper was, what you were going to get out of the taper, set unrealistic expectations on where your third attempt was going to be, which, you know, set you 10 kilos too far forward on the opener and then another 10 kilos too far forward on the second, and then all of a sudden you're stuck.
Which is why something what we said before, it's important that when you do, and if you do have a bad performance, you aren't just trying to reinvent the whole wheel, right? There's going to be little elements and things you might need to take ownership for that then cascaded. And that's another thing where you said, you know, you can have what looks like a terrible day or a really bad day when you actually weren't in terrible shape.
Yeah, maybe you made one bad decision and then it kind of like spiraled into another and then into another.
Often.
And yeah, I've had lots of comps that were like that. Like, you know, very, very close to being stoked, and then all of a sudden I'm disappointed.
And that's life.
Yeah.
And that's life. So, you know, there's a level of accepting that. But yeah, there's, as you can tell, like there's so many variables to this, and you can really chat on it as much as you want to chat on it. But it's good to recognize all those factors, because there's probably 10, 15 things we've spoken about, and there might be people listening who've had these bad experiences on comp day and whatnot who can relate to one or two.
Yeah. And
can't relate to any of the others. And that's exactly what it is.
Maybe you'll relate to one of them one day.
That's it. Exactly. You'll go, oh, yeah, literally. You'll remember that thing that was said one time when you go and have an experience.
That's assuming that anyone's actually listening to this.
Yeah, is anyone out there?
DM Matt the word microphone, really if you're listening up to this point. All right. That was so bad.
Yo, DM
Matt.
DM microphone.
All right, last question from Jason Raby. What will you change next prep to sustain the momentum you had?
Okay, so I think it's a great question, and we probably have mostly answered that, which is great. My answer is that we will change very little about the plan. We will mostly consider what things will help us to feel like we are creating a runway and feeling like we are getting better and stronger and more confident each block. And that we will learn our lesson about pacing and essentially not as a partnership be trigger happy on the top end performances, and trust that what we are doing will produce the outcome like it has in the past, just it did it at the wrong time before. We also need to reflect on the fact that the previous comp was spectacular and a 9 for 9 for us, and that we know what we're doing. I know what I'm doing as a coach. You trust that I do. The plan that I put in front of you that will be collaborative in nature will be right for you, and that we will be leading from one block to the next as we always do. So my answer would be go back to what we do and just do what we normally do, which is generally good training that creates momentum as it is. So it would be to take the things that were in the way out of the way that we've kind of recognized throughout this whole chat.
Yeah. I think for me, I think the most important thing for me is leaving the carrot at the end of the stick and not like trying to pull it earlier and to prove to myself or whatever. Like I've already proved to myself that I can perform well with not a lot of top end work in there, particularly on deadlift, but also on squat as well. So almost like stay in the pocket a little longer and, like you said, trust that what we're doing is going to work. And I also think another thing for me, when I do more frequent heavy singles, is it puts a little bit of extra importance on those singles. And also it takes a lot of energy out of me to like fire myself up for a heavy single, which often detracts from the rest of my session. And we know that for me, like doing that meat and potatoes work, whether it's the back down sets or the accessory work or the, you know, the secondary work, that's the stuff that's actually building me. It's not that top end.
Yeah.
And, you know, almost taking a little bit less importance on that top end work and keeping the importance on that meat and potatoes work for longer, and keeping that top end work as a carrot at the end of the stick for me to keep me like engaged in the training. It's like, okay, it's coming.
Yep.
Whereas like what I did in this prep was it's coming. Oh, it's already come. And then now I've got to try and recreate that training when I've already like almost finished the job. If that makes sense.
Totally. When you've already climaxed.
Someone's going to soundbite that one as well.
It's going to sound fantastic. Yeah, no, you're exactly spot on. I think that if you even just look at the example of when you pulled 3, when the plan was to pull 260 for 3 singles, what better example?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like you were in your strongest shape for deadlifts. Pulling 40 kilos less. That's it. You could have, like, if you were to look in like a could be would be world, like if you hadn't hit those 2 lifts we sort of highlighted before, and you had hit that auxiliary work that you'd missed out and done about probably 5 to 10% less on the top sets because it would take less out of you, and you would have just maybe done whatever, you would have done better.
Yeah,
categorically. So knowing where our priorities are and knowing what's a nice to have and have to have, that's good. And not getting that mixed, because that got a bit mixed, I think.
Yeah.
As well as the other compounding elements that we've already kind of discussed. So that answers that pretty well, I think.
I think I think to summarize the entire prep and the comp performance itself, I think given how many things got in the way of a good day, I was actually still pretty strong.
I agree.
I missed lifts and obviously my total was a lot less, but I think I was probably as strong as I was for the previous comp, maybe a little bit strong. Well, definitely a little bit stronger on deadlift. The other 2 were probably right on par, if not like a smidge below. But given all of those things that didn't go the way that we wanted to, or that I didn't commit to in the way that I should have, it still actually went okay.
Oh, definitely. There's positive takeaways. There's a lot of productivity and learning throughout the experience. And as I mentioned, I think at the very start, being able to not be too sidetracked by this or that competition performance and be able to zoom out. And I talk about this a lot, zooming out, zooming in. We zoom out and go, how are we going? Yeah, good. Zoom in, how is that? Could be better. How do we make it better? Do this, right? That's the simple of it. Being able to zoom out and zoom in to kind of make yourself feel a bit better and not try to reinvent the whole wheel. And then clean up the things that meant that the zoom in experience wasn't what you wanted.
Yep. Cool. So thank you everyone for listening. That was episode 25. Hopefully episode 26 isn't 9 weeks away like the gap that we just had, but we'll get there. And thank you guys for listening.
Thanks for having me.